The Orthodox Network presents Awareness and Education, Rabbis as Allies, Understanding the Roles of Rabbis in the Lives of People in the Orthodox Jewish Communities, a forum of learning and discussion for community professionals and leaders. The Orthodox Network is a collaboration of social service providers and Jewish agencies who work in partnership to improve services to the Orthodox community in metropolitan Chicago. This program is the 12th forum of the Orthodox Network. It was presented on Monday, May 13, 2019 at the Abe and Ida Cooper Center of JCFS Chicago, 6639 North Kedzie Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Good morning. I am David Rosenberg, Coordinator of Jewish Educational Services and Orthodox Community Liaison at JCFS Chicago. On behalf of the Orthodox Network, I would like to welcome you to our 12th Awareness and Education Forum, Rabbis as Allies, Understanding the Roles of Rabbis in the Lives of People in the Orthodox Jewish Communities. The Orthodox Network is a collaboration of social service providers in Jewish agencies who work in partnership to improve services to the Orthodox communities in metropolitan Chicago. Our planning committee includes Marilyn Siegel, Director of Adult and Family Services for JCFS Chicago, Ed Lowe, Assistant Director of Counseling at the MAP Center, Jeff Blumenfeld, Director of Career Counseling for JCFS Chicago, Mark Suartez, Director of the ARC, Miriam Ament, Director of No Shame on You, and Esther Yona Friedman, who is the coordinator of the Orthodox Rabbinic Task Force of SHALVA, and from whom we'll be hearing soon. We appreciate the ongoing help of Amanda West and Elizabeth Llewellyn of the Department of Practice Excellence at JCFS Chicago, and Laura Olier and her colleagues at the beautiful Abe and Ida Cooper Center where we're meeting this morning. A thank you to our co-sponsoring agencies. Is there any image up there? There was one a moment ago. Whose names appear on the flyer, which you've seen, and I'll call it up. Thank you to our co-sponsoring agencies. This forum will explore the roles that rabbis play in helping address human needs for members of the Orthodox Jewish communities. We'll learn about how clinicians can work together with rabbis to address clinical needs, how rabbis and community members work together, and how rabbis can serve and can be, so to speak, used as a resource in meeting the needs of members of the Orthodox Jewish community. The choice of topic for this morning's forum grew out of many discussions at the Orthodox Network, and it calls to mind visits that we have been able to participate in as part of the occasional all-day trainings on the Orthodox Jewish communities. Rabbi Reiss, one of our speakers today, has graciously invited participants in those trainings to visit the Beit in the Rabbinical Court of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, and that's been a very important part of our understanding of how to better serve members of the Orthodox Jewish communities. I'd like to draw your attention for a moment to a very interesting essay which you can find on a website called Torah Musings by Rabbi Gil Student, in which he describes how rabbis have historically understood their roles in the community. And I think some of the themes that we're going to see drawn up today in our presentations are reflected in things that rabbis have said. When asked, what does a rabbi do? We often think of rabbis as being first and foremost scholars of Jewish law and tradition, scholars of Talmud, scholars of Bible, scholars of the oral Torah and the written Torah. They also often play various communal roles, which we'll learn about, and they answer many, many different kinds of questions. So in this website, you can see different answers that rabbis have given. Famously, there's a discussion about whether the primary role of the rabbi is to serve the needs of the underprivileged, serve the needs of people when they're suffering, or is it primarily to answer religious questions? We'll have a chance to understand better those various roles that rabbis play in the course of our presentations. Our colleague Jeff Blumenfeld will now introduce our panelists who will address the topic. Jeff will moderate a question and answer period following the presentations, and then there'll be a wrap-up at the formal end of the formal part of our morning together, mapping out next steps, following which we will have time for informal networking. Jeff.
Yes. I don't think. You think so?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. Good morning, everyone. So a couple of quick things. One, I do want to make sure that everybody realizes that you received a evaluation, and if you need CEUs, you've got to make sure that you turn in the evaluation in order to receive your CEUs. And the CEUs have your name on them. It was pointed out to me that last time people were just grabbing them. So please don't do that. Make sure that your name is actually on them if you need CEUs. So I'm going to be introducing the individuals in the order that they will be speaking. The first of our speakers is Rabbi Reiss, who is the Beth Din of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, noted Torah scholar, attorney, and jurist. Rabbi Reiss continues to serve as the Rosh Yeshiva at Reiss. Rabbi Reiss is summa cum laude, graduate of Yeshiva College, and went on to receive his law degree from Yale Law School, where he was senior editor of the Law Journal. He received his rabbinic ordination from Reiss, where he also earned the distinction of Yadin Yadin. The next individual who will be speaking is Lynne Brody. She's the senior case manager and psychotherapist for the ARC. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and linguistics from UIC and a Master of Arts in counseling psychology from Adler University. Lynne joined the ARC in 1985. We are actually, you've got on the invitation, there were supposed to be 4 speakers. Unfortunately, one of our speakers was not able to attend today. That's Dr. Robinson. The last of our speakers is Esther Yona Friedman. She has served in the Orthodox Jewish community in a variety of roles for the last 30 years, had an active role in the day school system, serving on many committees, and has served on the Health and Wellness Council, started a milk program, is one of the original safety kit moms, and head of a hygiene committee at her daughter's school. She's a DONA certified doula as well as a wig stylist for 32 years in this role. She's had the opportunity for informally speaking with women and hearing their stories, allowing opportunity to provide for unique insider's view and understanding of the dynamics of the Orthodox Jewish community. Her work with SHALVA started in 2013 as an Orthodox outreach coordinator and currently is the Rabbinic Task Force coordinator. Ms. Friedman resides in West Rogers Park with her husband. She is the mom to 7 wonderful children and a proud bubby to 5 active grandsons. I think it's a great summation of who she is. So I just want to say one thing before we do get started and I turn over the mic to Rabbi Reiss. I'm kind of fascinated by words, their origins and their meanings, and we chose the word allies, rabbis as allies. The word ally actually has its roots in Latin, and it means to bind, which I think is fascinating because, in fact, what that does is it infers a sense of a bond or a binding between the individual and the rabbi, the community and the rabbi. And I think that that's really telling. If you look at the definition of the word bind, it refers quite often to contractual agreements and agreements within the community. And so I think that kind of furthers the sense of the importance and the role that a rabbi has in the community as an ally. So I would like to hand over the mic now to Rabbi Reiss and give him an opportunity to speak. You're quite welcome.
one has to be mindful of the context in which one delivers any kind of presentation. And normally, if I would be speaking about the rabbi as an ally, I'd be mostly addressing rabbis and explaining what our role is supposed to be, to what degree we are allies, to what degree maybe we're something else. But looking around in the audience, I think that it's probably more apropos to speak about how one relates or should relate to their local rabbis and rabbinic institutions in the context of how we view rabbinic figures. So I'll try to do that briefly, and then of course we can have a lengthier discussion during the question and answer period. So as Rabbi Rosenberg mentioned, there are lengthy discussions about what exactly the role of the rabbi is supposed to be. It's a famous story of Rabbi Meir Berlin. He was the youngest son of the Netziv of Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Berlin, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin Yeshiva. Rabbi Meir Berlin eventually would change his name to Rabbi Meir Bar Ilan, and the university known as Bar Ilan University was founded based on his memory. He died, I think, in 1949, and the university was founded in 1950. And at one point in time, when he was still young and growing up, he turned to some of the leading rabbis of his generation, including Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, including the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Yechiel Michael Epstein, and he asked them what they thought the primary role of a rabbi should be. And Rabbi Yechiel Michael Epstein said it's to be a great and erudite Torah scholar, to be able to issue halakhic rulings. When he turned to Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, and according to the account that he wrote in his book, he wrote a book called From Volozhin to Jerusalem. So in that book, he said that Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik explained that it is the rabbi's job to manage and to oversee all of the communal institutions that serve the Jewish community, whether welfare institutions, charitable institutions, the doctors and the therapists who serve the community, the schools, and other important cornerstones of the community, and to make sure that everything is working effectively and that every single member of the Jewish community has access to the resources that they need. In other words, that the rabbi doesn't only serve as a figure who answers halakhic questions, but also as a figure who makes sure that he's able to refer people to those resources in the community that will serve their needs. And therefore, the rabbi plays a very critical role in terms of interacting and interfacing with all those who are responsible for the well-being and the welfare of everyone in the community. Now, Rav Joseph B. Soloveitchik, who was a grandson of Rav Chaim Soloveitchik and the Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University, and really the leading rabbi in the modern Orthodox community in the United States for many, many years, he wrote a book called Halachic Man. And he was fortunate that he didn't only have to read books to know what Rabbi Meir Berlin had to say, because he had direct access to people like Rabbi Meir Berlin. So he writes the following account in terms of his own conversation regarding this interaction that was relayed to him by his uncle. He writes, "My uncle, Rabbi Meir Berlin Bar Ilan, told me that once Rav Chaim Brisk was asked what the function of a rabbi is." In this version of the story, he didn't mention that Rabbi Meir Berlin was probably the questioner, but this is the way the Rav recounts the story. And Rav Soloveitchik goes on to say, Rav Chaim replied, "To redress the grievances of those who are abandoned and alone, to protect the dignity of the poor, and to save the oppressed from the hands of his oppressor." That it was a much more pointed response that spoke about why it is that the rabbi is in charge of all of these functions and has to make sure that the proper resources are provided for everybody, because the main job of the Rav is to protect the weak and the vulnerable, and to make sure that everybody gets exactly what they need in order to be uplifted within the Jewish community. This is why Rav Soloveitchik explained that the position of a Rav is not appointed from up above. We don't have some archdiocese or something like that appoints who's the rabbis who are going to serve the different communities. The rabbis are appointed by the communities themselves. This is a principle that is required by the Gemara. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Ein ma'amidin parnas ala tzibor eli im ken nimlachin b'tzibor. We don't appoint a rabbinic figure unless we first have them reviewed and interviewed and vetted by the congregation that they are going to serve. Because the rabbi's job is not merely to be a halakhic expert, it's to make sure that he's able to be an ally, able to bond, as it were, with the different members of his community, that they're able to relate to the rabbi, he's able to relate to them, and he's able to ensure that their needs are always served. But one has to understand what the nature of this alliance is all about. It's an alliance which is predicated upon Torah principles. It's an alliance which is predicated upon principles of Torah values and integrity. And therefore, the rabbi can't simply go along with everything that people in his community want to do. Part of the rabbi's job is to give gentle guidance and instruction towards sometimes changing their perspective and their mode of thinking. It doesn't mean that a rabbi is always supposed to approve of everything that people are doing within his community. And this is perhaps a more tricky part of the rabbi's job. There's a passage in the Talmud, in Maseches Ksuvos, that speaks about how Abaye and Rava spoke briefly of the different roles of the rabbi. And Abaye said they were great Talmudic rabbis, Abaye and Rava, and Abaye said that if a rabbi is very well liked by everybody in his community, then that's probably a sign that he's not doing such a good job. It means he's defending, people who might be abusers. He's defending people who might be thieves and people who are committing all kinds of wrongs and travesties because he just wants everyone in his community to like him, and he's not giving them proper musar. And then Rava amplifies this point, and Rava said that I originally was hoping that everybody would love me, and then I came to the conclusion that since I had to sometimes decide cases that came in front of me, I had to adjudicate disputes within my community, so those people who would win the dispute would love me, and those people who would lose the case would end up hating me. But then he said, over time, I came to the conclusion that I would have lots of cases where people would come in front of me, and sometimes they would win, and sometimes they would lose. So I realized that either everybody is going to hate me, or everybody is going to love me. What does this mean? He realized that the bottom line is that if he acts with impartial and objective Torah principles, and he always conducts himself with the utmost integrity, then people will come to appreciate that. They'll realize sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but at least they have a rabbi who stands up for a principle. But if he would simply try to accommodate everybody all the time, so then they would realize that their rabbi is an individual of no principle, and then nobody would end up respecting him. So it's extremely important that the major guiding principle of a rabbi be to act with integrity according to Torah principles and according to Torah values. And I always tell people that one of the ways in which this is accomplished is to understand that there are two different types of cases that come within rabbinic purview. When people come and turn to the rabbi for help. There's a case where a person is only coming to the rabbi with respect to something which is deeply personal and deeply private. A person is wrestling with some type of a spiritual dilemma. They are wrestling with their faith and their relationship with God. In this type of a context, a rabbi can deal exclusively with this person, put them in touch, if it's necessary, with therapists and psychologists to whatever degree the nature of the person's problems might be beyond the expertise of the rabbi himself. But it doesn't need to necessarily involve a sensitivity towards other parties who may be involved. But there's another type of interaction the rabbis have to be very careful about, and those who interface with the rabbis when it comes to these types of cases also have to be careful about. And it's what the Talmud refers to as makom shechav la'acharini, where there's another individual who might be adversely affected by whatever instruction is going to be given. So, for example, it might be a contentious divorce situation where somebody is coming to the rabbi because they want the rabbi to take their side with respect to a custody dispute or something like that. But if the rabbi takes that person's side, they haven't really heard the other person's, the other spouse's point of view and their own perspective and side of the story, and the rabbi might be facilitating a situation that is actually detrimental to the interests of the family, and they have to take a step back and say, wait a second, I can't really assist or be an ally in this type of a case where there's somebody else who might be adversely affected. And then it becomes more important for the rabbi just to steer the individual towards a proper objective process. It might be steering the individual towards the rabbinical court, so that the rabbinical court can meet with both parties and deal with the case. Or if it's preliminary stages of something which might blow up to become a giant dispute, it's appropriate for the rabbi to say, let me help you on a pastoral level, but I can't really tell you exactly what you should be doing without involving the other person, and I have to reserve the right that if the other individual, the other person who might be affected, whether it's a spouse or a business partner, whomever it is, should come to me later on and ask me to advise them, I need to be able to say one thing. I'm not going to break confidences, but I need to be able to say, you know what? It just so happens I did have a conversation with the other person. I can't disclose to you the nature of the conversation, just like you might not want me to disclose to the other person our conversation right now, but I need to let you know that I did have a conversation. I remember I had a get case once in which there was a very tense divorce situation between a couple in a particular rabbi's community, and the wife had gone to the rabbi and poured her heart out to the rabbi about all the marital difficulties she was experiencing, which was certainly appropriate, and even appropriate for the rabbi to be a listening and a sympathetic ear. But then after she told him everything about the marriage, the husband came to the rabbi a couple of months later as the situation continued to worsen, and the rabbi was a sympathetic ear towards the husband. The husband subsequently found out that the rabbi had previously met with his wife but didn't tell the husband about that previous encounter. And the husband felt like he was completely betrayed because he felt that the rabbi probably was predisposed or may have been predisposed in favor of the wife's position when the rabbi met with the husband and didn't tell the husband that he met with the wife. So he promptly left the shul, and angrily declared that he's not going to give his wife a get. And it created an aguna situation because of the fact that the rabbi was trying too much to be an ally b'makom shechav la'acharini, when it could potentially adversely affect another party. So it's very important that one not put a rabbi in that position to take sides in a particular case where there are warring parties. The main job of the rabbi is just to provide the right resources and to steer the parties in the right direction so that there be the appropriate process under those circumstances. I always say one of the trickiest challenges that rabbis have is preserving notions and expectations of confidentiality. because confidentiality is easy to preserve when you're meeting with somebody about some type of a faith struggle that they're having. Much more difficult to preserve when you're dealing with a situation where somebody tells you, oh, by the way, I'm planning to kill somebody, or I'm planning to cheat somebody, or I'm in the process of robbing somebody. Because the Torah says, we just read about this in last week's parsha, Lo selech rachil be'amecha, v'lo sa'amod al dam re'echa, ani Hashem. You're not allowed to be a talebearer. You shouldn't betray confidences, but at the same time, lo sa'amod al dam re'echa. You're not allowed to stand idly by when your brother is bleeding. And sometimes, if you have to divulge information to save somebody from harm, you have a halakhic obligation to do so. And therefore, a rabbi also has to spell out in all communications the limits of a rabbi's ability to preserve confidences, because sometimes the situation is such where it is chav la'acharini, somebody else could be adversely affected, and all of that has to be shared. And you need to understand that as well as health professionals when you meet with the rabbis, that a rabbi has an obligation to provide for the necessary resources, but also to ensure that there be fair and proper procedures of adjudication of disputes where the rabbi is not unfairly and precipitously only taking the side of one party in a dispute. Therefore, if you come to a rabbi and you're dealing with a difficult custody case, I have something like this in the community right now, where a person is dealing with a very difficult and thorny custody situation, and they're going back and forth between the different rabbis who know the husband happens to be an ex-husband and an ex-wife, and the rabbi of the ex-husband is reportedly taking the side of the ex-husband, and the rabbi of the wife is trying to be a proponent of what she feels would be just in terms of the custodial arrangement with the child. And what I try to explain to everybody who's involved is that it's not proper to put the rabbis in this type of a position. A rabbi can't really adjudicate a case impartially without having both sides in front of the rabbi. And the main job of the rabbi is just to be a sympathetic ear in these types of situations. So eventually the parties referred this individual who was struggling with this issue to myself, because they said, oh, you need to go to the Beit Din. They finally figured out that this is a matter that needs to be resolved by the Rabbinical court. So the person, the woman in question, came to the Beit Din and she said, wonderful, now I understand I was in the wrong place all along. I'm supposed to be in the Beit Din. So you tell my husband what it is that he needs to do. And it's not exactly how it works. My job as an ally in terms of being on the Beit Din is I'm an ally for Jewish justice and for the proper workings of all Jewish institutions. But I explain that what that means in this context is that we can summon the husband and then we'll listen to both sides. And I can't guarantee that the result will be one that is going to be to her liking, but I can guarantee that at least we'll have a proper process. So we have to explain limits and we need to explain parameters. I have this sometimes when dealing with halakhic living will situations where people come to our Beit Din and they ask questions about medical decisions, end-of-life decisions. These things can be very thorny and very difficult, but they will have named the Beit Din as the official halakhic authority to decide difficult questions. But what I sometimes encounter is that I get called by all kinds of different family members who are contesting the legitimacy or authority of the family member or the individual who was appointed as the healthcare proxy to ask those questions, to say, oh, the healthcare proxy was executed under duress, or it was executed without my cousin or aunt or parent knowing exactly what they were signing, and therefore what's being done is terrible, and I'm going to sue everybody, including yourself, for giving advice about, oh, you're unfairly keeping my relative alive when they really should be allowed to die in peace. And we find ourselves entangled in these intra-family disputes. Very important to try to just clear the path as best as possible before turning to the rabbi, or letting rabbis know when there are these intrafamily tensions that might rear their ugly head when a rabbi is just trying to provide halakhic guidance, but sometimes we become entangled in these very complicated family disputes as well, and that's something that we have to be mindful about, and something that collectively, when we're all working together, we have to be we're thoughtful about how to navigate in the best possible fashion. Now, there's also this overwhelming charge that Rav Soloveitchik identified of rescuing a person from abuse, from abusive situations. And sometimes we do deal with domestic abuse, domestic violence, things of that variety. So what I have come to do in my particular role, where I don't necessarily know all the facts, somebody is presenting one side of the story, but at the same time, we also have a duty to see to it that a person not be subjected to abuse and the like. So when there is criminal abuse that is going on, so I will direct people to go to the relevant criminal authorities, because things of that variety really are beyond the purview of a shul rabbi, and they're also, for the most part, beyond the purview of the rabbinic court. But what I'll do is I will give my guidance in an if-then type of formulation. What I'll say is, I don't know all of the facts per se. But if, in fact, the experts come to a determination that this is what is going on, if there is an abusive situation, if somebody really fears for their life, then they have the right to turn to the criminal authorities for protection under these circumstances. I'm not poskening, I can't rule in those types of cases, but I can say if this is the case, and you make a determination, if you really feel it's the case, then it would be appropriate to conduct yourself in this fashion. I'll just conclude with the comment that was made by Rav Chaim Ozer Grodzinski. He was considered to be the greatest posek, the greatest Torah authority in pre-war Europe. And that's a pretty impressive accomplishment if you know all of the different Torah authorities who lived in pre-war Europe, pre-war Lithuania. Rav Chaim Ozer Grodzinski was considered to be the greatest of them, and he published all of these dazzling and brilliant Talmudic essays, but he said, towards the end of his life, he died in the late 1930s, shortly before the Holocaust broke out. He mentioned the comment, and this is quoted in his biography, that what he is proudest about in terms of his accomplishments in life were not his brilliant and dazzling Talmudic insights, as incredible as they may have been, but he was the proudest of every single time that he helped an elderly widow across the street. To him, that's what it meant to be a successful and accomplished rabbi, to be an ally of those who were needy, those who were vulnerable, to be able to provide them with the help and with the assistance that they needed. And this is what we spoke about in last week's Parsha. We learned Kedoshim. We're told Kedoshim to you. You're supposed to be very, very holy. And everybody asks, what does it mean to be holy? Does it mean that you just pray with lots of fervor? Certainly that's part of it. But Rabbi Shimon Shkop explained that what it means to be holy is to be like God. Ki kadosh ani. That's what the verse says. God says, I'm holy, you should be holy too. What's the nature of God's holiness? God doesn't need anything for himself. Everything that he created is only to bestow good upon all of humanity, upon all of his creations. So that's what holiness means. When the Torah says, Kedoshim to you, we're supposed to be holy in our rabbinic positions, in any positions that we occupy. It means we have to figure out how can we utilize our talents, our skills, our professional abilities to help others, to reach out to the community, and to bestow good upon people as much as possible. So the challenge is doing this in a way which also imparts a sense of impartiality, responsibility, and accountability, while in the case of the rabbi, also maintaining his role as a steward of halacha and personal integrity. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is this my Robertson? Okay, I'm going to hold this up. So, hi, I'm Lynne Brody. I am case manager at the ARC, and I've been there a very, very long time, and I've had the opportunity to be a volunteer, and for a while I was a board member, and then I rose up to be a staff member. And I'm, after talking about my husband, my children, and my grandchildren, the biggest thrill to me is to be able to talk about the ARC. I want you to know a little bit about the history of the ARC. So the ARC started in 1971. And there was a lot of campus unrest at the time, and Jewish youth were looking to help their fellow man, but sometimes we're helping them perhaps in Buddhist temples or the Salvation Army, and not necessarily in a Jewish setting. And so Rabbi Yehoshua Heschel Hussein, he should have a refuah shlema, Dr. Benjamin Sokol, and a social worker, Avraham Kaufman, wanted to address this need they saw, and so they started a medical clinic where Jewish doctors would come volunteer and for free see Jewish patients. There was a cadre of people left in Albany Park as the community had moved further north. There was still a cadre of people who was left sort of behind, and so they were able to answer the need of these people who were poor, who had need of medical attention and assistance, and then also answer the need of providing a Jewish setting for Jews to help other Jews. So we continue to have a medical clinic, and that it's manned by Jewish doctors who volunteer. We've kind of morphed through the years to have a dental clinic and an eye clinic and a dispensing pharmacy, and we were started by these strong-willed individuals, Dr. Sokol and Rabbi Achenstein and Rabbi Kaufman, as these were Orthodox individuals. And so our organization kind of grew up as an Orthodox organization, and we've always been kind of hand in glove with rabbis, and we've always had a close relationship with a base of people that were chosen, rabbis that were chosen. And so as an organization, it's sort of been our practice to ask shilas, to have direction from these rabbis for issues that come up. For example, like the ARC has a dress code that was established according to Orthodox standards, and our kosher food pantry follows the Chicago Rabbinical Council's guidelines. And the ARC's employee handbook was created according to guidance from Rabbi Gedalia Dov Schwartz, Shlita, Rabbi Reiss's immediate predecessor. We should have a refuah shlema also. We have a relationship with our base in, and we ask difficult questions about can we turn somebody into the police, somebody who may be dangerous. I've had police come looking for a client, and could I turn that person over? Was that okay? Could I tell him, if I knew if he was there, or even if, admit that he was a client of ours? Can we attend, as an organization, can we attend professional development if it's held in the church? Can we provide a birth control in our pharmacy? Can the doctors in our medical clinic ever recommend abortion? So as an organization, we've had these and many other difficult. More recently, we started a dance therapy, and so we turned to Rabbi Reiss to ask if could men and women attend this together, and what was the dress code that people had to observe while doing it. And on the other hand, part of the bond is rabbis coming to the ARC. Maybe somebody has been coming to the rabbi over and over and over for financial assistance, and the discretionary fund is gone, and they need a little assistance with that. So sometimes our rabbis will turn to us for that. Or maybe they've got somebody who was found sleeping in the women's room of the shul, and, well, that's not necessarily a rabbinical issue. The person has to be not there. But how does the rabbi help with that? So we're able to work closely with rabbis, and sometimes they have even non-congregants who come to them for difficult issues. And rabbis aren't necessarily going to ask the first question, are you receiving food stamps or, SNAP benefits? So rabbis will turn to us, and we always try to give professional courtesy to the rabbis to make sure that whoever they refer to us, we deal with as closely and as quickly as possible. And if the person is okay with it, we will keep the rabbi informed and of the progress of the person. On a more personal level, as a therapist and a case manager, so I've come to realize that the person in front of me who's observant, who's Orthodox, is not necessarily the greatest expert on his religion. And a lot of times people will take on stringencies that are not correct. And it's always okay for me, I've learned, it's always okay for me to encourage a person to ask a shaila. And there's nothing, and it's my job as a therapist and as a case manager to empower and encourage my client to ask that question of the rabbi. That there's nothing the person wants to talk about that the rabbi hasn't already heard of. The human condition is the human condition, and the goofiest, weirdest things that people come to us with, most troubling, let's say, they've already heard about. It's not new to them, and a lot of times, people. I had a woman recently who turned down a job, and she was a part-time worker in an adult language school, and she had an opportunity to take another job. And she said, this new job would have been much better and pay better and all kinds of pluses. She said, but they wouldn't give me time to give the language school 2 weeks' notice and to leave, and I just didn't feel that was the right thing to do. And sadly, she came to me after it was already done. But I was thinking, gosh, if you had asked the shaila, I'm sure you would have been able to take this job and not, turn yourself, lost such a wonderful opportunity. More stringent to herself. Also, people who have many, many children, and they're really struggling with special needs and all kinds of pressures that people have with larger families. I have to encourage that person to, it's okay to talk to your rabbi about birth control. It's okay to ask. It's, our opinions about things are colored by the community and the world that we live in, and it's not necessarily the Jewish view. And we need to know that we can be encouraging our clients to talk to their rabbis. Sometimes issues will come up just also personally. How long can I take time to daven mincha? Is that okay? Or if I come late to work, am I stealing from my employer? So there are issues that come up for me personally as an employee and as a member of the community that I will be turning to my rabbi for. People will come in and women I notice it with, maybe someone who was covering her hair stops covering her hair. Next time she comes, maybe she's not dressed as neatly, as modestly. So I'm not her religious advisor, I'm her therapist, but it's diagnostic, and I can see, hey, what's going on, and how can I help you? I mean, that's going to be coming up anyway. So these are ways both, on a communal level and on a personal level that we work very closely with rabbis, and it mirrors actually, the individual who is part of a community and who personally may have issues with rabbis. And it's always okay to call and ask. If a person does not have a relationship with a rabbi, then I would certainly turn to the CRC and encourage the person to do so, to ask shilas, and maybe call with them if that was more comfortable, or just perhaps work with them on what was okay to say. So with that, we are very happy to be working with the organizations that we work with, and one of them being SHALVA, and I'm happy to present to Esther Yona.
Not going to lie, I'm really nervous. Thank you all for coming in, having us today. Very interesting that Rabbi Reiss used the words Torah principles, because that's the first words that I have, and that we have to understand as Orthodox people that our perspective is coming from our Torah guiding principles, and that our asking shilas, which are questions, our asking advice and seeking guidance as individuals is based on the Torah beliefs, on our Torah values. Sorry. And that the rabbis are there to help us interpret and understand. I would call it the shades of gray. There's lots of gray amongst the areas. So I might ask a question. I might call a rabbi about something and get one answer. And someone else might call and ask a question and get a different answer. So we need to understand that it's important that every individual ask their individual shilah, their individual question, because no two cases are the same. And some of the questions that we're asking, they don't have to be life crises. They could be something as simple as, not sure what camp to send my child to. Here's the situation. And it's a discussion, it's a conversation, it's what I would call an eitzah. It's advice. So as Rabbi Reiss so eloquently put it, there's two components. There's the spiritual guidance and ruling, and then there's there's the spiritual guidance, and then the ruling, and then the advice. I am SHALVA's Orthodox Rabbinic Task Force Coordinator. As a result of the work that we've done at SHALVA, the outreach, the education, understanding the dynamics and the needs of an Orthodox woman, and the huge, huge impact that the rabbi plays and the role that he plays in the lives of all Jewish families, we've implemented this task force. We've created a resource for Orthodox women to have support from the rabbis. So a woman comes into SHALVA, an Orthodox woman, and says, I'm struggling, I'm having issues. And maybe it's my husband doesn't want me to go on birth control, I don't want any more children. And how to navigate that. The therapist is not the rabbi. And as Lynne said, what if they don't have a rabbi? Well, we have rabbis. We have 12 wonderful rabbis. Rabbi Epstein is one of our rabbis sitting on the Rabbinic Task Force now. We've approached 12 diverse rabbis in the community across the spectrum, because the Orthodox community is not one way. There's many ways, just like there are many ways of the Torah. There are many ways in how people observe their religion, and we've tried to get a cross-section, as many rabbis in the community, to come together. And I want us to take a step back and say, and understand that our rabbis in Chicago are amazing. They are approachable, and they want to help. They've all come together from all walks of life, put aside any political issues, anything that they may have, which I don't really know about, but they've come for the betterment of helping our families, our women in the community. And a therapist can advise a woman and say, here, pick a rabbi. You know, we've got a nice menu here. Which one would you like? And they can then call them anonymously, or they can call them directly and say, you know, the therapist at SHALVA suggested I call you. And these rabbis have tremendous knowledge and have been really given education and training as to a woman who might find herself in an abusive situation, how to understand that and how to better deal with that. If she signs a release, then the rabbi and the therapist can speak about the situation. And the beauty of that is it gives totality of support. So a woman can have her therapeutic process as well as her religious beliefs and needs, which cannot be underestimated how important that is as well. We need to understand that a rabbi, as I think Rabbi Reiss said, you know, is a rabbi. A rabbi is not a therapist, and I think the rabbis know that. So on the flip side, rabbis in our communities are generally I call them first responders. They'll come, a woman will come, somebody will come, a friend will come and say there's an issue specifically with a family dynamics, and I'm concerned about the situation. A lady might come to a rabbi and say, I'm in a situation, and then the rabbi can assess it and decide, this might be abuse, this might not be abuse, I'm not sure, but I know who can help you. And then they can refer them to SHALVA. And again, if the lady signs a release, the therapist can speak with the rabbi. If a rabbi would speak with our therapist and said, hey, did Sarah call you? And she can't tell you that because of confidentiality reasons. So we need to understand that, confidentiality is maintained, but that the rabbi doesn't have the time, and the therapeutic, unless he's a therapist as well, to handle the situation. More importantly is I find that the rabbis are very busy people. They just don't have the time to hold the hand of a person and say, let's go through this process. So what ends up happening is that if they refer them, then they can get support and services they need. And it's not just to SHALVA, but I think the rabbis need to continually know about all the resources in the community to be able to direct them, whether it's to the ARC, whether it's to JCFS, whether it's to SHALVA, whether it's Chai Life Lunch, and I can continue on, and how lucky we are that we do have the resources. But I think as clinicians, therapists, people in social service agencies, we need to understand that our rabbis many times are our first line of defense, so to speak. They're the first one to call. Not only that, but when we ask a shaila, it empowers a person in a way that is unbelievable. So it gives us the confidence to be able to do something. If I would say, I think that Lynne had mentioned about calling the police on somebody. I'm not sure I would know what to do about that. Should I call? Should I not call? What's my moral obligation? And if a rabbi would say, absolutely, you call the police, all my questions, all my doubts are taken care of. I also want to mention, we don't only call a rabbi for very important things. But that didn't sound right. We don't only call a rabbi for advice and guidance, but even mundane things like, I cook dairy and meat. What do I do with my pot? Is the food kosher? Things like that. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. We are constantly calling. Not only that, but we encourage our children to call. I know a few of our daughters, had an assignment in school. They had to call a rabbi and ask a question. This was giving them encouragement to call the rabbi. Rabbis also, I don't know if this is a misnomer or not, they speak to women. Okay? They do. A woman could call. And remember, in a situation where they may feel intimidated, I don't know, it's the rabbi, I don't know, you call. And many times we need to understand that when a question is asked, the women will give more information than the man. And I had a story actually from a customer as a sheitel as a wig stylist. She had said to me, again, sit in chair, open mouth, so they tell me everything. And they said that her husband had called. She had 6 children. She didn't want any more children. And her husband called, and the rabbi had said, 6 months. Call me back in 6 months. You have a 6-month break. She said to her husband, 6 months? I don't want 6 months. I don't want any more children. She picked up the phone and called the rabbi, and she's like, Rabbi, I hate children. I don't want any more children. He's like, well, your husband didn't tell me that part. And clearly they didn't have any more children. But the point is that it's very important to encourage, whether it's your client or the person in front of you, to ask the shaila yourself. Ask the question. And you may hear the word shaila. Shaila is a question over and over again. And if we're asking questions and for guidance, it is huge. Just reading over my notes here. But I'm really proud to say that, going back to the Rabbinic Task Force, I kind of go back and forth, is that what an amazing resource it is for our community, because it gives the rabbi the ability to be approachable, where women know, families know, I have a neighbor who's struggling with this and this issue. And the rabbis on our task force really understand. I believe most of the rabbis understand it, but to the depth of it, they really are educated, trained, and aware of what that means, and the ability to be able to connect the dots and sort of see the red flags. going on. Important for us to maintain a relationship with the rabbi and not rabbi shop. I think that might be a red flag. Like, oh, I asked this rabbi this, and I asked this rabbi that. And that understand that when we're given a psak, a ruling, we don't rabbi shop. That's a red flag if people are rabbi shopping. Well, I didn't like what he said, so I'm going to go find another rabbi. And it's always possible to find the rabbi that is going to give you the answer you want. So that's also something to keep in mind. It's like shop a rabbi, 1-800. Yeah, it's not really working. It's you ask a shaila, you ask a question, we go with that ruling. And like Rabbi Reiss said, we don't always like the ruling. And sometimes the rabbi can be our best friends. They can give us the clarity and the confidence to do what we need to do and the strength to move forward in whichever way we need. Thank you so much. In the back, if anybody wants, I brought some business cards for the task force, and actually I call it the cheat sheet of picture of all the rabbis on our task force. Thank you, Rabbi Epstein, as one of our rabbis, for being here.
I think that was absolutely wonderful in terms of diversity of perspective. I got a lot out of it in terms of being able to understand more of a sense of the role of rabbis. I would love to hear questions for any of the individuals that have spoken today. I think there are an awful lot of times where we might not have questions specifically of ourselves, but we might have questions on behalf of other people. It's a really marvelous opportunity to really find out more information in greater depth. So I would encourage you all. Does anybody have questions? Yes?
So I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I have the unique perspective of being married to a rabbi who has served the Orthodox community for, I think we're at 32 years. It's always so difficult to portray the forest and not just the trees. So I think that it's also important for those people who are not part of the Orthodox community to realize that rabbis are not just serving the downtrodden, which is of course a very important role of the rabbi. There are people who don't make a move without the rabbi. And not everybody's like that. Some people go through life without much of a connection to their rabbi because perhaps they just had enough experience in life that they figured these things out for themselves, or they can look it up themselves, or they're just not interested in that kind of connection. And then there are people who, my house is a constant in and out of individuals, of couples, of families who need to talk to the rabbi. There's a side entrance for those people who don't want the rabbi's wife to see that they're coming to talk to the rabbi. And, my husband will say, I'm meeting with someone, they're coming through the side door. Fine, I close the door, turn on the stereo so I don't hear anything that the people are talking about. And then there are people who will come in and say, I'd like your wife to be involved. There's an individual in the congregation right now who's going through chemotherapy. And her husband stops at the rabbi's office every morning because he just needs a jolt of compassion from the rabbi. So I just think it's important to know that people do this differently. And there are people who literally don't take a step in their lives without consulting with their rabbi. And then there are people who don't need that. But certainly the rabbi wants to be seen as an ally. I think there are some people who are afraid of the rabbi. So they won't use the rabbi as an ally. I don't want the rabbi to know what's going on. And then there are people who are like, oh my gosh, I just went through this and that, or did this kind of thing. I need my rabbi to guide me as to how am I changing this situation.
Do you see a lot of reticence in, because I know that you see clients, so do you see a lot of reticence in the clients that you serve in terms of reaching out to rabbis?
I think there's all types.
Yeah.
I think there's all types. So I don't particularly see a reticence. Everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you helping people ask the right question. I think it's 90% of the job, like with the birth control example, like you need to prepare clients. A lot of what I do is like, I always joke, I can get any answer from any rabbi and anything I want. It's all how I put up the question. The client's high need, I need to call the cops, right? He's telling me, you're the professional, do whatever you want. And as a personal person, like, we joke, well, what kind of answer do we want to get, you know? But it's important to have a relationship and also coach your clients on how to act. Like, they need to self-disclose enough information to the rabbi. I often see, we're having a little problem with shalom bias, that means marital partners. That's like a big red flag. Like, that's where a rabbi would have like a little problem with shalom bias, or there's tremendous domestic violence and child abuse going on. Like, kind of helping people disclose enough so that they can ask the question. Oftentimes, when someone will come back to me that they got an answer that I just am not believing, like they called a rabbi I work closely with on a regular basis, and they got a really bad answer. But so did you tell him anything? Like, because there's just no way he would have given you that answer if you actually shared what was going on. Call me. Would you like to do it 3-way? Like, I just be happy to provide it. So I think as therapists, as clinicians, it's okay to say, did you tell him everything that was relevant? Because when I have found answers I thought were bad, I've immediately gone to, and what kind of information did you get? They only work with what you give them. So if you're hiding domestic violence or drug addiction, or if you're having an affair or whatever else is going on, they can't answer you if you're not transparent.
So for you, it's also a role of educating your clients.
Tons of education. Tons of education. We always joke, we have friends out of the country, and they have 4 children, 4 different children. So two of them are very, very, very right-wing. One of them is more to the left, so they don't always like to eat in the house. So one son calls the rabbi and says, we don't eat this hechsher, right? Yeah, of course, I don't mean it. The other brother-in-law called the same rabbi and said, we want to go to so-and-so's for Shabbos. They use this hechsher. How hard does this have to go? He goes, oh, you know what? We also eat that hechsher when we go to family. The relationship's really important. Go for Shabbos. It's totally fine. This is not the hill to die on. Same question. One said, we don't eat this, right? Yeah, it's better not to. 2, I want to go for Shabbos. This is what they eat. There's nothing else available. Is this, where do I hold? He goes, you eat and smile. I do the same thing. And same question, same rabbi, same family. How you ask? We don't eat this, right? So, just thought I'd throw that out. Very helpful.
Other questions? Yes?
I mean, I guess this is to piggyback on what I was saying, like, as a person who's working in the Orthodox community who is not a religious person, does the panel have any ideas about when there is maybe a conflicting response from the rabbi and the trained therapist? I don't have a specific example, but it's, I'm coming here because I feel like in my role I work very hard to have good relationships with rabbis and to understand myself as a non-Jewish person what these values are. And I guess I'm just curious to hear from anybody who is able to speak to if I might have a therapeutic kind of intervention or suggestion that might conflict with the advice that a client gets from a rabbi. How to resolve that.
If I find out that there's a therapist, somebody calls me up and says, my therapist is recommending a particular course of action, but I'm worried that it might not be appropriate from a halachic perspective, what should I do? So my typical response in that case would be, can I have access to your therapist? Because I would like to speak to your therapist and just discuss the Jewish law issues so we can brainstorm together and figure out how to address the various concerns that the therapist is addressing in a manner which will be in conformity with the Jewish law. So we'll try to partner and work together under those circumstances, because it's never good to just make it into an adverse relationship where a person has to pick and choose between the rabbi and the therapist. We recognize that there is very valuable advice and guidance that's being offered by the therapist, and sometimes the therapist would be able to benefit from learning more about the Jewish law parameters, just as we, as the rabbis, would be able to benefit from learning more about therapeutic concerns, because each one will inform the other. A halacha doesn't exist in a vacuum, and as you've heard from a number of these very thoughtful comments, sometimes the answer will actually be different based on the therapeutic situation. For example, there's a principle in Jewish law that pikuach nefesh, saving a person's life, overrides all types of different violations. If we come to the conclusion that a person's life may be in danger if certain liberties are not taken, that will also influence our ultimate response.
Can I add to that also? I would also add, if I may, that on the flip side, maybe the therapist can suggest to the client, if you sign a release, maybe I can speak to the rabbi directly if they're comfortable with that. I don't think you have to be Jewish to speak to a rabbi. And I know that that's sort of the model of the task force that we have. Is like, I'm not sure I understand this. Would it be okay if I speak to your rabbi? And they've done those where they can problem solve and brainstorm. Dr. Robinson wasn't able to be here today, but I'll speak on her behalf for a second. There's that whole medical area and piece where we spoke about end-of-life issues. I know as a doctor, she has had tremendous relationships with rabbis. They're able to call up and discuss things and say, well, I recommend this, and the rabbi will say, no, just do it like this. Certain rabbis are experts in different areas, whether it's kashrus, the laws of kosher, whether it's the laws of the divorce, whether it's medical issues, whether it's end-of-life issues. There are some rabbis that sort of, am I right, Rabbi Reiss?
Yes, absolutely.
That sort of have an expertise. So on a personal level, when we were going through some medical issues with my father, we were able to reach out to certain rabbis. And one of my husband's rabbis we reached out to, I asked him about a living liver donor. And he said to me, how do you live without a liver? And I thought, oh no, what's he going to tell me? Clearly, it's out of his league, but who am I to tell him that? And I'm like sitting there plotting. And the rabbi says to me, well, clearly this is out of my league, so you need to call another rabbi. So again, he knew where his areas of expertise are and not. Oh my goodness, I just spoke on your behalf. Thank you. Barbara Robinson is here. We told them you had an emergency.
I did. I'm here.
Would you like an opportunity to?
I would love an opportunity to listen.
To listen.
And then I certainly will have something
we're
to say.
kind of in questions, so other people that have questions?
Could I help with a comment?
Absolutely. Would you?
I teach in a yeshiva boys high school, all boys high school, as well as in a Beis Yaakov, all girls high school. I just want to point out that something that Mrs. Friedman mentioned, I just want to talk about. She mentioned about how her daughters had an assignment. They were supposed to call a rabbi. So I just want to just briefly touch on that. It is much more common for boys to have no hesitation. In fact, they spend not only in day school, certainly in high school and beyond high school, interacting with their rabbis all the time. So there's almost never a hesitation for a boy to ask a rabbi a question. They've been doing it their whole lives. In the girls' high school that I teach, I also give that assignment to the girls to ask the rabbi a question. Many of these girls are hesitant to do it. They don't interact as much with rabbis. Even in high school, they only have a few of their teachers are necessarily men and rabbis. Many of them are hesitant to do it. So first thing, it should be understood that no one should think that just because a girl grew up, Orthodox and went to shul that she's comfortable talking to rabbis. In fact, very often the response is, why do we need to do this assignment? My dad asks, my brother asks, or my husband will ask. And I try to make sure they understand that doesn't always work, and we've heard today why that's true. So I've given the girls this assignment. I always ask them at the end whether they found the assignment easier or harder than they expected. Almost always the answer was easier than they expected, which hopefully they're not just saying that because they know that's what I want them to say. The only time they told me it was harder is a couple of times had difficulty reaching the rabbi. Never got a response that the rabbi was hard to talk to, bit my head off, etc., which is exactly what I want to get across to them. Many girls have told me that even that one time that making that phone call changed their whole fear attitude they had, which is great. I just want to make sure everyone understands that no one should assume that an Orthodox woman, is comfortable calling a rabbi for whatever reasons they aren't, or they aren't necessarily. We down at the high school or seminary level are trying to work on that, but this assignment certainly is not done in every school, and even, we can't say the success rate of the assignment is 100%, so understand that is certainly something to be aware of, that there may be that fear or that lack of confidence to do it.
We role model that at home, and we encourage our children to call and ask shilas. Our kids, our boys, our girls have had questions, and they're like, could you call the rabbi? I'm like, no, here's the phone. It's your question, it's your shilah. You ask how you want it to be asked. One of our daughters, we were discussing college. Where she should go to college, what's the best college? She's a social worker. Maybe what would be more in line with her religious beliefs, what to do. And I spoke to the rabbi once, twice, and I'm finally like, you're a big girl, here. You call yourself. And they had a lovely discussion, and they came up with their plan that she was comfortable with. And till today, they will pick up a phone and call and ask because they've been encouraged and they've done that. So it is a huge.
Okay, so I do have something to say on this.
We'd love to have you.
Thank you. Hi, again, I want to apologize. Thank you for your patience here. My biggest experience was always that women would say, yes, my husband asked the shilah for this, that, or the other thing. So it just reflects the whole thing. And I worked very hard, and still do, to encourage people, you have to ask the shilah yourself. Why? Because Rabbi want to give you the answer that they think you need and want, and they aren't going to know that if it's filtered through another person. And it's really important. So I have some Rabbeim who insisted, for example, with any contraceptive questions, that they need both partners there. That you don't get just one wants, or this one wants, or that one. You need both members of the couple there in order to give a reasonable answer. But a lot of times, Rabbeim want to give you the answer you want. They know what that is, and then they can do that if they can, and if they can't, they can explain why sometimes. And if you don't talk to them yourself, I tell people, then they aren't going to know. And it's essential. And I think it helps when whoever is going to ask the shilah knows that going into it, that's why you have to ask, so that they can really understand what the question is without filters.
I found that a couple issues that to be attentive to holier than thou, like where a client will tell you, like, that's prohibited by the Torah, that's this, and that's this, and that's this. That's like a red flag clinical issue, and it needs to be treated as such, even if you're not Jewish. And it's very easy when the God police come to just, oh, well, they can't do that. And, no, let's go to the rabbi. I find that with families with, like, addicted members, when you want to do treatment, they're like, well, they need to go somewhere that's Shomer Shabbos and kosher. I'm thinking, your kid is currently doing IV drugs, sleeping around, and doing all sorts of other things. I'm wondering what our priorities are. Let's call Rabbi first. You know what? It's amazing. Do you know treatment's a priority? So it's when they go, they need this, this, and that. That's a clinical issue that needs to be addressed. I'm not saying not to ask, but they'll tell you there's no question, it's prohibited. Like, that's something to say, you know what? I think that Jewish law really wants to make sure he's safe. Let's kind of think this out when we call together. That's been my experience. And it's helpful when you're part of the community that you can kind of call them out on that, but I want to encourage people who are not part of the community, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it looks like denial, then quack back.
I just want to thank you for that, because as a substance abuse professional, I can think that my opportunities for referral are limited, because I'm thinking they're not going to want to go there because I know that it's a co-ed unit and the blah, blah, blah. But what I'm hearing is if someone's life is at risk,
we want the best unit. I mean, you have to ask the question because each case
so the
depending on the
pathology
level.
It's always okay to ask.
It's always okay to ask. And you'd be surprised by the answer given what's going on. I said that the parents are in denial and the kid needs treatment. I said, can I recommend, he goes, go with the best treatment plan. Literally said, well, we're at Shabbos and Kashrus later. They're not holding there. Like, let's get him safe. It's almost like a heart attack. Well, he's having a heart attack on Shabbos. Should we all talk about it? Should we wait till the or should we call 911? So, like, again, ask. But when you hear families projecting denial, especially in addiction, it's denial. Like, you're not that unique. You're an addict like everybody else. What kind of treatment do you need? And ask the rabbi.
It's okay for a therapist to say, so what the rabbi say about that?
Yeah. See, this really is helpful for me because
I
want them to get the best treatment available for whatever ailment they're telling me about. But I also want to be respectful of their observance. So this is, to know that, encouraging to ask the rabbi.
And if the answer sounds wrong, call back. If it doesn't make sense, don't believe the Kool-Aid. Because they said, right, we should really go to my kid's doing okay. They want to recommend it's too aggressive. It's not Shomer Shabbos. No, if it's too aggressive, don't do it. That's the answer, but that's the question they asked. They didn't say my kid's near death.
And one of the jobs for the rabbi, especially a communal rav, is to clarify the parameters of when it's not even necessary to ask. So, for example, the case where a person's having a heart attack on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, the Talmud Yerushalmi says, Hanishal harezu migunim, that if the rabbi gets a question in the middle of Shabbos, my husband's having a heart attack, can we go to the hospital? In the meantime, precious minutes have been lost. It means the rabbi's not doing a good job at explaining to the community that in these types of situations you could just go straight to the hospital. And similarly, if people feel like they're too afraid to approach the rabbi to ask a question about a certain type of therapy that might not be perfect in terms of kashrus, in terms of Shabbos, but it really has the potential of saving somebody's life, then that also would indicate a deficiency on the part of the rabbi, that the people don't have a comfort level. I mean, the rabbis who are the most, successful and beloved in the community, like Rabbi Cohen, for example, are rabbis who have broadcasted the message that, number one, they're eminently approachable, and number two, they've been able to get these messages out so that the communities understand about the primacy of saving lives and addressing emergency situations.
So I just want to clarify something that has been said a lot in here, that I'm just concerned that people who don't understand the halachic process don't have a clear understanding of what that means. Because a lot of times people have said asking a question to a rabbi to get the answer that you want. I just want to clarify that. Probably I should ask Rabbi Reiss to clarify.
I also have heard that a little bit, and I think that those of us, who are in the rabbinic world, know what that should mean and what it shouldn't mean. So I will try to explain that a little bit. It's very important that a rabbi be armed with all of the relevant information so that the rabbi can give the best possible answer. But the answer that you want is not necessarily the answer that you're looking for in terms of whether something is permissible or forbidden. The answer that you want, and I think this is what everybody meant who used that terminology, is the answer that takes into consideration all of the facts and the circumstances of the situation. But it could very well be that after the rabbi learns all of the relevant facts and circumstances of the situation, that the answer is no, that you're not going to be allowed to do what you want to do. And it won't necessarily be the answer that you quote-unquote want, but what I think we are emphasizing is that what you really want is to receive the correct answer according to Jewish law. And the way to get that is to really clarify all of the circumstances and all of the special facts that relate to the question that is being presented.
And I think that also those people who don't have information on how the halachic process works, a rabbi doesn't get to just say, well, I think this would be best for you, so I'm going to tell you, you can do this. A rabbi can only base his answer on what does Jewish law say. But the rabbi can, if the rabbi has all the facts, he is then able to tap into, well, Jewish law says that in this circumstance, under these conditions, then there's room in Jewish law to say we're going to go in this direction. So it's very important to have all the facts. A rabbi can't just say, yeah, it's okay, you can eat not kosher. Not a problem, because in your family people don't eat kosher, so go ahead and eat not kosher. A rabbi could never say such a thing, and that because there's nowhere that it says that you can eat not kosher, except there are probably circumstances where, medically speaking, a person needs to eat something that's not kosher.
Right. I mean, most rabbis have, just like doctors, if you're, a very well-trained and competent doctor, you have a checklist of questions that you're going to ask. And there are also red flags when people mention certain things, like having a shalom bias issue or things of that variety, that are triggers that guide the rabbi in terms of knowing what are the follow-up questions that I need to ask under these circumstances. And just like there are certain types of situations, as we mentioned, where you might be approached by one party, but you recognize that you're not going to be able to give the correct answer according to Jewish law unless you also speak to the other party. So these are all different parts of the rabbi's checklist.
I think in that way, the rabbi and the psychotherapist are not so far apart, because I often find myself quoting Rolling Stones, like, you can't always get what you want, but you can get what you need, and that is really how it works.
It's the first time the Rolling Stones were. I have a question for Esther and Yona. Esther, Yona, you mentioned that the members of the task force of SHALVA have gone through some training to understand how they can be beneficial to clients of SHALVA. Could you tell us more about that training process?
So it started originally with Rabbi Union from LA came in, and we had a open, I'll call it DV 101. We had an open program where he spoke from a rabbinic perspective, presenting again culturally sensitive and getting up and speaking to really all the rabbis in the community. I think we had about over 30 rabbis there at that. From there, we had, with the help of other rabbis, they had helped us to garner this and identify 12 rabbis in the community who have come. Barbara Siegel has given, our clinical director has given them extensive training. We didn't think that the rabbis would go to a 40-hour DV training. And we have had, I'm trying to think, about 6 sessions with them, with different therapists in different areas of domestic violence and abuse in general. We've had our legal liaison meet with them as well. We've had scenario playing with them. We've had question and answers with them. So that's been a lot of the training. We continue to meet twice a year for ongoing training and discussion. We have another meeting coming up in June. One of the rabbis had said to me, he says, I don't think there is anything I have met more for in this community than this task force. Which I don't think he was so happy about, but but they understand the need and the commitment, and maybe even I could be so bold as to say, I hope we're not being recorded. They understand their limitations and what they don't know, and that they want the help, and they want somebody to help them hold the bag. So we've had rabbis call SHALVA up and say, this is what's going on. I'm not sure. How can I advise my constituent? How could I help them? What's the safest way? They don't want to compromise as well. So that's some of the training, though, that they've had. And if these rabbis aren't sure, then what's been created is a relationship where they can call a therapist and say, hey, I need some help.
Other questions? Comments? Observations?
I'm wondering if you could share with the group some of the more perhaps sensitive issues that you deal with that rabbis are perhaps helpful or maybe could be more helpful with.
Okay. The number one issue that I dealt with that was sensitive is always contraception. It's so common. And in my experience, it was, for many, many people, there was an assumption that, again, they're going to say no, that I'm not allowed to use any kind of contraception at all, ever. And so there was an educational piece where I could say that certainly isn't the case, and you always need to ask the individual shaila. Or I'd have people where, and again, it goes back to what I said, is that you would need to ask the shaila and ask the shaila yourself, or go in with your husband and ask together. And I was always happiest with the Rabbi that said, I got to talk to both of you and know where you're at, because there are so many psychological issues involved, so many emotional issues involved, besides the medical issues that are involved. And then, what type is okay? Can you use this form? Can you use that form? Can you use the other form? And then you have to combine the medical and the psychological and the religious, the halachic consideration. And so sometimes we'd have back and forth. And I'd say, well, that's not a good choice for this one, or that's not a good choice for that one, and trying to figure it out. Those are the biggest ones. I think that as things have evolved today, some of the bigger issues are going to revolve around genetic testing, and which is now so readily available, and what to do with it, and how to do with it, and where to go with it. And there's just so many ways. And I can speak toward what I told my daughter-in-law when she was like, why would we get tested? Because what difference is it going to make? And I said to her, it makes a huge difference, because if, God forbid, you both carry a bad gene, we live in a day and age where we can do in vitro fertilization, and we can do pre-implantation genetic testing, and never have an issue, because we will only implant embryos that don't have whatever this disease is. So then you can have nasty diseases that aren't lethal diseases that you can then deal with, and not have to deal with terminating pregnancies and things like that. Now, are insurance companies going to pay for it? No. Where's the money going to come from? That's another story. But at least there are options, and people need to be aware of that. And so I think that's the big overlying area where we need communication and teaching and probably outreach to work on. Because it is a hugely sensitive issue, and there's all of this feeling of, why bother to test? What am I going to do about it?
Just to give one example. So I recently received a call regarding a couple where the wife discovered that she was pregnant with a Tay-Sex baby, and this involved all of these issues: the issue of what to do with the actual pregnancy from the perspective of Jewish law, and also what to do with the marriage, and trying to have children going forward, which implicated all of these different issues. But I think as a general rule of thumb, whenever dealing with contraception questions, whenever dealing with termination of pregnancy questions, which unfortunately rabbis do get those questions from time to time, whenever dealing with assisted reproductive technology type of questions, it's impossible to provide proper guidance without speaking to both spouses. It would be, irresponsible. That's, what it means in terms of really bringing everybody into the discussion. Just like when dealing with psychological issues, it's also important to bring therapists into the discussion. There's a therapist and to get waivers. And when there are medical issues, to be able to bring the doctors into the discussion so that the rabbi can really understand exactly what's going on from a factual perspective.
I just thank you, Dr. Robinson, for bringing up the issue of genetic testing, and I'm just doing like a little bit of a shameless commercial here because I'm here with my colleagues from the Sarna Center for Jewish Genetics. And for those of you who don't know, we provide genetic testing for these types of things. So I just wanted to let you know we were here. We're happy to have a conversation afterwards, but thank you for bringing it up. That is critical for our community.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
What else is being done to empower girls and women to speak to rabbis? Just speaking on a personal level as an Orthodox woman that did not go to an all-girls school, it was emphasized to have a relationship with a rabbi, not a rabbi, because it's not appropriate. And so it increases the dependency on a man, whether it's the husband or father, to get the answers for direction of life. So how do you go about it? Like, what else can you do to emphasize that girls and women?
Who's the question to? Anyone in particular?
Whoever wants. The whole panel.
I think to the extent that a person brings that kind of an issue to her therapist or her case manager, so then it's up to the case manager to empower and encourage the person to ask her own question and maybe role play and maybe be there in the room with her when she asks, or give her some ideas of things she can say, and always to encourage people that it's a good idea to call. And also, we now have, besides having individual rabbis you can ask, there are boards that you can call and numbers you can call. It's like 1-800-RABBI, and that are sanctioned within the city, whether it's mikveh issues or the other, or is that the name of the other? There's a mikveh board that you could
Beis Hara.
And the Beis Hara that a person can call and ask, especially immediate questions need an immediate answer.
Can I answer to that? So, without knowing a lot, but I would think that a Rebbitzin would help a woman in a situation like that, encourage her to call a rabbi. That's what I would think, but I think Rebbitzin Cohen can answer to that one better, where a college class teacher or somebody would say, hey, you need a rabbi in your life that you could make those phone calls to. Is that correct?
Well, that's one of the things that I encourage. I teach brides who, so women who are getting married, and there's a lot of Jewish law that they're not familiar with that relates to the marital relationship and the laws of using the mikveh and when husband and wife are allowed to engage in intimacy and when we're not allowed to engage in intimacy. So I spend a lot of time with the young ladies, encouraging them to develop a relationship with their rabbi and call him directly. I always tell them, look, if you're not going to do that, then at least either talk to his wife or have your husband call the rabbi. But I tell them that they're robbing themselves of the opportunity to connect to the very Jewish laws passed down in tradition. It's something we call the Masorah. It's passed down from rabbi to rabbi to rabbi. Not everything is written. And I tell them that they're robbing themselves of the rich tradition that we have, tradition based on law. It's not just tradition, but it's tradition based on law, that they're robbing themselves of that when they don't talk to a rabbi. So, I'm so sorry someone gave you the impression that a woman is not supposed to talk to a rabbi, because women have every right to talk to a rabbi. And as has been said so clearly by the panel, the rabbis usually get better information from the women than they do from the men. And very often what's happening is happening to the woman. And, it makes so much sense for her to share that information.
Can I add one more thing? When we say and we use the word rabbi, I want to add that for people that are working with individuals that are in the school system, I'm about to blow a myth. Women can talk to their children's rabbeim, to their children's male teacher. Okay? So if there are issues going on at the home or issues going on in school, Rabbi Ginsburg, you could back me up on that one. It is okay for a mom and to be encouraged for her to pick up the phone and speak to the child's Rebbe. That would be their Hebrew teacher or things like that. Oh, no, I don't ever speak to the Rebbe. No, my husband's the only one. And it's like, no, you really can pick up the phone and speak to them. No, really? And especially when they get to high school, you think, oh no, well them, and especially the more right-winged you get, it's definitely could be intimidating. And I have encouraged women all the time, and I think I'm sharing that. Moms can speak to rabbis too, of any age, of any teachers, and they want to, and they want to hear. It's been my experience and my experience from other people. So I just blew that myth out of the water.
Absolutely, 100% correct.
In my family, my wife is much more likely to be the one who's calling the children's principals than I am. She's much more aggressive. but I'll add that probably 2 or 3 times I get a call from a woman who was recommended to me by my wife. She would call my wife, and my wife says, this is a halakha question or a situation that you really need to speak to my husband about, and she'll conduct that referral. But in addition to that, it seems that many people do have the comfort level, because approximately 50% of the calls that I get in my office in general that are not from rabbis, and 50% of the calls that I get usually go from rabbis. But of the other 50%, about 50% of those come from women. I think it's certainly apportioned equally. And one thing that I think is helpful that some of the Rabbanim in the community do, especially if they teach girls, they teach young ladies, is they'll sometimes bring their class on a class trip to the Beit, just to learn about what we do and to ask questions and to develop a relationship. And one of the goals of that meeting is that they have a comfort level that after they meet with myself, with other members of the Beit, they'll be more comfortable afterwards picking up the phone and asking us questions. So that's certainly something that people can do. I can name certain rabbis in the community who do that with their classes, and I think that's also a very good idea.
All right, I think unless anybody has any last-minute questions, we're going to be wrapping up. So I want to thank the panelists for a wonderful job. Thank you all, really wonderful, and appreciate you coming. And so please make sure that you fill out your evaluations, turn them in so that you can get the CEUs that you need. Make sure that you take some food with you on the way out. Thank you so much.
And there's time for networking right now, so feel free, we've got the space till the bell.
Sometimes it's okay. And I appreciate it.